If you've been wanting to remove some of the excess wheel gap on your GT500 and improve handling, Eibach has the perfect solution with this set of Pro Kit lowering springs. First thing, we will remove the front wheels to start disassembly on the front struts. Remove both brake line brackets that are attached to the back of the strut. The sway bar end link can then be unbolted from the mount in the strut and pushed to the side. Both lower bolts on the strut can be removed next. After both bolts are out, the hub assembly can be pulled from the strut and set aside. Up in the engine bay, all 4 of the top nuts can be removed, starting with the 2 that hold the strut brace. After the strut brace is off, the last 2 nuts can be removed and the strut assembly pulled from the wheel well. Use a spring compressor to tighten down the stock spring in order to remove the top hat on the strut. Once the nut is off the hat, we pulled the hat and spring from the strut, along with the dust cover and bump stop. We placed the bump stop in the new dust cover, then slid it on the strut, followed by the new spring. Make sure it sits properly aligned in the top and bottom plates. Since the Eibach spring is a tad shorter, we did not need a spring compressor to reinstall. Just a second set of hands to slightly pull the spring down to start threading the top nut. Reinstall the strut through the wheel well and you can fully tighten the top 4 nuts along with replacing the strut brace. Back underneath, we replaced and tightened down both lower strut bolts. Then we reattached the sway bar end link to the strut mount, and lastly, both of the brake line brackets were replaced. This will complete the front install after we replace the front wheels. Moving on to the rear, we first unbolted the lower shock mount so the rear end could sag just enough to pull the rear spring from its place on top of the axle. A pry bar may be needed. Thankfully, the Eibach rear springs are shorter, and install will be a lot less of a hassle. We then raised up the rear axle and replaced the lower shock bolt. Our GT500 now has a killer stance and much better handling as well with our new Eibach Pro Kit lowering springs.